My name is Maribel Rowan, and I'm 63 years old. I didn't wake up that morning with a plan to change everything. There was no dramatic moment, no script in my head, just a quiet, persistent feeling that had been following me for weeks, a sense that something in my life needed to shift. It was the kind of feeling that creeps in slowly, like a draft under a door, barely noticeable at first, but impossible to ignore once you realize it's there. It started like any other day. I was rinsing out a mug at the kitchen sink, listening to the familiar creaks of the house settling after sunrise. The sun was just beginning to filter through the curtains, casting soft patterns on the floor. The decision I made felt almost invisible at first, like a small pebble dropped in a pond. But it was mine. I got dressed, picked up my purse, and drove to the credit union I'd trusted for decades. Long before my daughter Alyssa was even born. The drive itself was uneventful, but my mind was busy. I thought about all the times I'd driven this same route, sometimes with Alyssa in the back seat as a child, sometimes with my late husband beside me. The streets hadn't changed much, but I had. I parked in my usual spot, took a deep breath, and walked inside. Carla, the teller, greeted me with her usual warmth. She asked how I was, and I replied fine, because it was easier than explaining the quiet anxiety that had become my shadow. I asked to open a new account, just for myself. No joint access, no extra names. I signed the forms, my hand trembling at first, then steadying as I realized what I was doing. I moved every cent of my savings into that new account. No phone calls, no explanations, no permission asked. As I sat across from Carla, I noticed the way she looked at me, not with suspicion, but with a kind of gentle understanding. Maybe she'd seen this before. Maybe she knew what it was like to reclaim something that had quietly slipped away. She didn't ask questions. She just helped me through the process, her professionalism a quiet comfort. When it was done, she slid the papers across the counter. "Only you have access now." I thanked her, and the words felt like they belonged to me. Driving home, I waited for guilt to show up. It didn't. Instead, I felt a thin, steady relief, like finally exhaling after holding my breath for too long. The world outside looked the same, but I felt different. I realized I hadn't done anything wrong. I'd simply taken a step to protect myself, to reclaim a part of my life that had slowly been slipping out of my hands. By the time I put the kettle on, my phone was already buzzing. I let it ring. For years, I believed that keeping the peace meant keeping quiet. But that morning, my silence was different. It was a choice, not a surrender. I stood in the kitchen, listening to the water boil, feeling the weight of my decision settle in. It wasn't heavy. It was grounding. Alyssa hadn't always been so present in my daily life. It started with small things, her offering to pay the electric bill online, saying it was faster. She dropped by, saying she was worried about me, that it made sense to stay close. At first, her help felt like love. She'd laugh off my old habits, call me old school, and insist she was just making things easier. I remember the first time she insisted on handling a bill for me. "Let me do it, Mom. It's just easier this way." She took my laptop before I could answer, clicking through screens with a confidence I envied. I'd always mail my payments, kept careful records in a notebook. She laughed. "Nobody does that anymore." I smiled, wanting to believe she was right. Gradually, her help became routine. She started sorting my mail before I saw it, handling bills without asking, and answering questions about my finances with vague reassurances. "You're fine, Mom. Everything's covered." When I asked for details, she'd brush me off with a smile or a sigh. "You trust me, right?" And I'd say yes, because saying no felt heavier than the truth. It wasn't about shouting or arguments. It was about convenience, her standing between me and the things I'd always managed myself. My voice in these conversations grew quieter until I realized she was speaking for both of us. It happened so gradually that I barely noticed. One day, I was balancing my checkbook. The next, I was being told not to worry about it. One day, I noticed my debit card wasn't where I left it. "It's in my wallet," Alyssa said too quickly. "You keep misplacing it." I laughed it off, but something inside me tightened. When I asked about a charge I didn't recognize, she told me I must have forgotten. The more I questioned, the more I felt like I was the problem. I started to doubt myself. Was I really forgetting things? Was I making life harder for her? Each time I asked for clarification, she'd respond with a gentle but firm, "Don't stress yourself, Mom. I've got it under control." It was meant to reassure, but it left me feeling smaller. That's when I knew I needed to reclaim my space. Not just my money, but my say in my own life. I realized that help, when it comes with conditions or makes you feel invisible, isn't really help at all. So, I went to the bank. Carla didn't ask questions. She just helped me open a new account, her professionalism a quiet comfort. When it was done, she slid the papers across the counter. "Only you have access now." I thanked her, and the words felt like they belonged to me. Back home, Alyssa's calls came quickly. When I finally answered, her voice was sharp. "Why didn't you tell me you went to the bank?" she demanded. I told her I didn't think I needed to. That conversation ended with more silence than resolution. I could hear the hurt and confusion in her voice, but I also heard something else, a sense of losing control. Later that day, Alyssa showed up on my porch, her anger spilling out before she even reached the door. She accused me of acting recklessly, of making decisions that affected her. I stood my ground. "It's my money," I said. I needed it to be in my name again. The argument wasn't really about dollars and cents. It was about control, about who gets to decide what's best for whom. Alyssa insisted she was protecting me, that she'd given up so much to help. But I realized I'd given up something, too. My independence, my confidence, my voice. We stood there, words hanging heavy between us. For the first time, I told her the truth. I needed to feel safe in my own life. I needed to stop asking permission to use what I'd earned. She was stunned, and for a moment, the anger faded, replaced by something like fear. I saw her shoulders drop, her eyes searching mine for understanding. After she left, the house felt different. Not lighter, but steadier. I made tea, paid my bills, and started keeping a notebook of what I'd done each day. It felt ordinary, and that was the point. I wrote down every payment, every phone call, every small victory. It was a way to remind myself that I was still capable, still in charge of my own life. A few days later, Alyssa came by to pick up a box she'd left. She didn't argue. She just said, "I didn't realize how much I crossed." I told her that's why I had to draw the line. She left quietly, and that felt like progress. It wasn't a grand reconciliation, but it was a start. Life settled into a new rhythm. I met friends for coffee, paid my own bills, and slept better at night. The distance between Alyssa and me wasn't empty. It was necessary. It gave us both room to breathe. I found comfort in the small routines I'd always loved: watering my plants, reading in the afternoon sun, calling an old friend just to chat. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: love doesn't mean giving up your voice. Real help doesn't come with strings you're afraid to name. Boundaries aren't punishments. They're how we stay whole. It took me a long time to understand that setting limits isn't about shutting people out. It's about making space for yourself. I didn't move my savings to punish my daughter. I did it to remember who I was before I started asking for permission to live comfortably in my own life. I did it to reclaim my sense of self, to remind myself that I am still here, still capable, still deserving of respect. If this story speaks to you, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps keep these conversations alive. I didn't lose my family that day. I found my footing again. And sometimes that's the bravest thing you can do.